What's up, Cradle fans? It's Bamfilosophy back with another episode of Information Requested. I am joined, per usual, with my co-host Remix, but this
What's up?
time we have a special guest, the man, the myth, the legend and latte writer himself, Travis Baldree.
I really should
Welcome,
have had a
Travis.
coffee. I really should have had a coffee.
I
with
have
you.
a coffee.
I'm
Well,
unprepared.
way to rub it in his face.
Hey, I drink coffee
Hey,
all
guys.
day, every day. So the fact that you wrote about coffee made me happy, for one, because it's coffee. And it's a fantasy book about a coffee shop. That's just, first of all, it's a premise that I didn't ever expect, but it's a premise I loved. And then
So it turns out there's a whole genre of this that I was not aware of. The coffee shop AU that is
Really?
out there and like, I don't know, Wattpad or whatever, but there's like a whole genre of this that's mostly web fiction that is like, I think a lot of times it's like fan fiction where characters that are known from different properties are like, this is them at the bar or the coffee shop, and somebody's the bartender slash barista, and there's somebody that tends to come in and like a relationship develops kind of thing. I was not aware this existed until after I wrote the book, and everybody said, "Oh, it's like a coffee shop AU," and I was like, "What the heck is a coffee shop AU?" And then I had to
That's
go research.
amazing. I've never heard of that. I'm gonna have to check it out.
yeah, wow.
Kind of
Have
blew
you
my
read
mind
any
there.
of them?
I haven't read any of them yet, not yet. I was just looking it up, so like, let's see, coffee. You can listen to mine really.
It's
really
okay.
loud
We've all
keyboard
got
here.
mechanical
Coffee shop
keyboards.
AU, alternate universe fan fiction trope that became popular in LiveJournal. That's what it was, LiveJournal fandom.
Wow, that's a throwback.
Anyway, so I was not aware of that ahead of time, and now I feel like an idiot.
Okay. All right, Travis. Well, I'm going to show you a video clip of the last time you were on the show, which happened to be about a year ago. The last time I talked to you was 6 months ago at Dragon Con, but the last time we talked in this format was almost exactly a year ago. So I'm going to play about 15 seconds of our last interview because of what you said and how it pertains to the current state of the universe.
Anybody would want to read them. You ask if I would write anything.
Yeah. All right.
The most I've ever done is a novella. I will never release them. I don't know that anybody would want to read them. I like writing. I enjoy it. And I like reading good writing. I don't think I will ever be an author at this point, possibly due to the laziness of being able to narrate other people's good stuff. It's really nice to be able to just come in and put the whipped cream on.
Which is hilarious considering the end of your little blurb on your book is a dollop of romance.
Yeah, I guess it is.
I think that's a little bit of foreshadowing.
I'm all about putting the whipped cream on.
You're all about putting the whipped cream on. So Travis, what happened?
So I ended up doing National Novel Writing Month. I've done it a bunch of times and I've never finished. Or never finished.
Okay, let's pause for a second. Raise your hand if you've attempted NaNoWriMo and failed.
Oh yeah, so many times.
Okay. 100% so far. So you finally found a success.
I finally did one. My friend Avon, who's another narrator, convinced me to do it, and she wrote, and she also finished 2 that month. So we both were like kind of nano buddies and kept each other on our word count targets. And for the first time ever, I outlined, and I've never outlined before. I always thought I was a pantser and I could just write. Apparently not. And I was telling Will when I was talking to him about this, is like, as a game developer, people always come up to me and they're like, I'm going to make this game and it's going to be like every amazing game ever. It's going to be World of Warcraft and GTA. And also it's going to have like all the story decisions of Mass Effect and it's going to be the best thing ever. And I'm like, you should just make Tetris, dude. Just make Tetris and learn how to make a game. So this is my Tetris. I picked a simple book for once that didn't have to have 1,000 characters and a bunch of viewpoints and to have like an epic conclusion. It's just a very simple book.
True. You did throw in some interesting like intrigue elements though. Like there's a certain character that's obviously like foreshadowing that he may or may not be some sort of a time traveler, and that creates some elements that can come into like future books. Do you have any desire to write more in this universe?
Yeah, the plan is to write, and I have another one that I already know what I'm going to write. And my plan is to do kind of like a Discworld kind of thing where They're all kind of in similar places, but the stories are all usually different main characters that sometimes intersect, so that you can kind of drop in anywhere. You get a whole story, but it kind of builds over time. Because I like
Love
that kind of
that.
thing. I don't
Yeah.
I don't like reading the 8th book in a series after I've forgotten what the previous 7 were, because it's been 2 years since one of them came out, and I feel like I have to go read them. I prefer to be able to pick up and figure out what's up.
Yeah,
So
to
I
just
like
know the world and then get the
Yeah, I have all
context
this
of the
passive
story.
information, and then you can read in any direction. I pick up book 3, but I could go back to book 1 and like, "Oh, this is kinda cool," and I remember seeing this in book 3, but it doesn't matter which order I saw it in. It's just kind of builds over time and kind of connects. So that appeals to me. Um,
With that being said, do you think that you're gonna include Viv as a main character again in this at some point, or you
Only if
think
she has, like, a story worth telling, I guess. So, if she's got some sort of challenge or something interesting to say or do,
right?
right now, I would just assume that she might just appear for some other reason. For me, one of the things that made it work was that I just had, like, a basic relatable, like, idea, which was, like, the idea of not having to do one thing and being able to start over, and here I am, haha, doing audiobooks after doing games and making a book after doing audiobooks. So it's for me, that's really relatable, right? And I think it's relatable for lots
Yes.
of other people. I had people who, had been in the military and came back and were like, "Okay, I've gotta restart my life now." You know,
Mhm.
this is what I've been doing, and now I need to be someone else, and that was relatable to them. So I think for lots of different people, for lots of different reasons, that's relatable. But if I'm gonna write something, it has to be like a basically I think I've at least for me anyway, I found out that there's gotta be some basic relatable underpinning. Like
Absolutely.
and it's not like
Yeah.
it's not like it's a really epic, like, you can switch jobs is not like a really amazing it doesn't sound like an amazing idea for a book, but I think it just ends up being what the characters do with that hopefully makes it interesting.
Yeah, it kinda
Oh,
starts with the seed of that one thing, and then it grows from there, so
well, I mean, I think the large majority of people aren't living the life they want to live. I think we talked about this last time actually, where there's some like Thoreau quote. It's like most men live lives of quiet desperation, and many of those folks who like fantasy read fantasy because it's an escape. So to get a fantasy book that relates so heavily to what it could be in the real world and telling a story of like, hey, you bust your butt for 40 years doing something that appealed to you in your 20s but no longer appeals to you, you can start over and you can find success and you can meet the people that you've been missing your whole life.
Yeah.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
so I think that will be whatever I write is probably gonna be that kind of thing. And then the more I thought about it afterward and then, like, how I wanna write books, it's a lot kind of Terry Pratchett-y. Terry Pratchett always had, like there would be, like, a big social concept that he would, like, talk about, like, the post office and, like, why does this work and why does this function? The role of death and, or government or the police, everything. He would take some big social interesting concept that's fundamental that we all have to interact with some way, and then he would make a story with it that talked about interesting things. And I think for me, it's just something probably a little lower down and more mundane, like getting old or not liking your job or something like that as an
Yeah.
underpinning for whatever I'm gonna do. So, I know what
so
I'm gonna do next, but I don't
two-part
know.
question for the next, thing is, when did you realize you were going to actually finish this? Was it early on in, Nano or closer to the end? You're like, "Holy crap, I've almost got a whole book here," or
I think I wanna say I knew about 3/4 that I was probably gonna finish. Outlining helped a lot because I would always get stuck in the boggy middle that everybody talks about with the other books that I tried, and just having enough of an outline that I could always lunge towards some little guidepost to get me through helped a lot. I knew how the story ended, and I knew all the things that happened in between, which helped a lot. Because
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
I've ever known that before going into a book. I would have like, I think I kinda know how this ends, and I have a really good idea for a beginning, and probably some cool stuff happens in the middle, and then I'd get to the middle, and I was like, "Where'd all the cool stuff go?" And then I just never made
Okay.
it anywhere. That's what happened to me anyway. So it helped to do that, but my ambitions were, I'll finish this, it'll be cool to have finished it, and I'm gonna publish it because I wanna know what it's like for the authors I work with to publish books. I wanna see the other side of the fence. I wanna go through KDP, I wanna go through the publication, I wanna do the formatting, I want to see how it works because I'm just
Okay.
interested in stuff.
Do you think that part of the equation, the curiosity of what your authors go through to like get that empathy, kind of helped you get some distance from the writing part and made it less of a, because like for me, I'm writing a novel. I'm getting into that murky middle, and I'm thinking to myself like, man, is this going to suck? What will people think? And I mean, I know how to work through that, but thinking about another obligation that you made that I would make to myself, similar to what you're talking about, that kind of helps you get distance from those emotions.
I don't know if I can untangle it or not. Because once it was done, it was like, okay, cool, it's done. And I sent it out to some friends to read, and they liked it, and I got good positive responses from it. But you don't really
Yeah.
know what that means, and you really don't know what the world at large means. And it also, to a certain extent, I was a little scared. I was a little scared to put it out there just because I'm not used to being wholly responsible for the thing anymore, and being responsible for what somebody else's response to it will be. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that again after games. But also, I figured nobody would read it. So I thought I was mostly insulated from that. So I was like, well, maybe some people don't like it, but it's not going to be that many people. And
700 plus reviews later.
I tried to make it really obvious what the book was, also as kind of a defense against that, because I didn't want people reading it who weren't interested in what it was. So I wanted the cover to be really obvious about what kind of book it was. I wanted the tagline to be really obvious. I wanted the blurb. I wanted there to be no ambiguity about what kind of book it was. I didn't want somebody to read it and go, was like, well, how come there wasn't any big freaking adventure? Where's the conflict? Where's the dragons? Where's the...
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah, I
So,
think almost all the reviews, a lot of the reviews I looked at were like exactly as advertised, love it, nice and simple, help me relax.
And that was
slice of life, I think.
something that was relaxing. Yeah. I wanted something relaxing. We kept talking about like Hallmark movie fantasy books while in my narration Discord. I kept talking about Hallmark fantasy. So like it's just a cozy thing you can do, the dwarf goes home and has to work at dad's mine, and there's probably sweaters. It's just, this is not exactly that. It's a little bit more ambitious than that, and I want to say that it's a little bit more. It's not exactly a subtle book, but it's also not quite as twee.
There's some subtlety there. I mean, there's stuff that you don't explicitly throw out there, that you have to gather throughout the book. And like I said earlier,
It's really straightforward, though. I mean, it's
True.
not, and there's a lot of convenience and wish fulfillment to it. I mean, and I get to justify that with a magic rock that somebody buried underneath the ground. But still, it's not, that doesn't totally obviate the fact that it has a lot of convenience to it.
I think a lot of the subtlety was with the characters. The backstory of the characters was a lot of implication on, like, I don't know, Viv seemed like she had trauma that she didn't feel like dealing with, and she kind of wanted to get away from who she was, but you don't exactly find out how much of what she was, Was she a mercenary that killed like hundreds of people every day? Was she like bloodthirsty and then killed a family, and then finally, like, that was one step too far? I think that is really good.
So
and
the
then,
story wasn't ambiguous, but the characters' backstories kind of were. You got little snippets of like what helped shape them, but like you said, most of it was like social interaction.
Yeah. I mean, the goal I set for myself was that nobody died during the book. That nobody got hurt or died during the book, because I read a lot of that. Fights. There's so many fights that I read. There's so much like angsty, high octane combat and action and the stuff that I read, that I was like, I want to do one where nobody dies. And theoretically, you could say that like in the first paragraph something dies, but that's just like the end of like a previous book, really.
Mm-hmm.
So something that sword gets swung in the first paragraph, and that's it. And the only other potential death happens outside of the book.
That's true. I was just thinking that, like, who knows if it even happens. And speaking of that, or the character involved with that, Both Durius and Amity feel like really fun characters that you can bring with you wherever you go in this world of yours.
Yeah. And that's kind of the hope for all of them, is that they still all exist there and you can kind of bump into them, you know.
Yeah, that's great.
That's the hope. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, here's a question to change the subject a little bit, to get back on like the art of writing, and it's a little bit more abstract. But you had NaNoWriMo before this most recent one. Then, correct me if I'm getting the timelines wrong, but at some point you went on this fitness journey, and I think most of that happened in 2021. Correct me, is that right?
Yes, I think so. It's 22. Yes, 2021.
I know
spent
times
2021 digging myself out of a decade of parenthood.
fair enough. I get you there. So you went on a fitness journey. Did being did, did being in shape or having more energy play into being able to manage all of the stuff that you're doing and with the consistency of writing that is required for NaNoWriMo?
I don't know. I mean, I definitely feel better. I hurt less. So, I mean, a lot of it was just, you get to my age and it's like you get up in the morning and you hurt and it sucks. So it was nice. I mean, it's nice not to get up in the morning and hurt. Honestly, I sleep way more than I used to, though. So I probably have less hours in the day.
That's
But
good though.
hopefully they're more productive hours. I don't know. I always
Yeah,
overcommit
they have to
myself
be.
and do too much stuff. So it's just like a chronic problem with me. I overcommit. Um, and November is not like the best time to write because you got Thanksgiving and I've got my
No.
anniversary and it's the holidays. And also it's just about the time where every author, like COVID finally caught up with them and books weren't getting done on time and schedule nonsense. So it was not, I'm going to try and spread the next one out a little better.
Yeah, fair enough.
But again, it's not like a super long book either. So it's not like I wrote, you know, a doorstop. It's a really lean, short book. It's, you know, not a novella, but it's not that much more than a novella. So
I mean, what was it 62,000 words
yeah,
written
it's
in
62.
1 month?
Yeah, yeah, which is like what, 18 or 1900 words a day or something. Which is not. That's not a huge number of words.
It's not,
Uh,
no. For fan or for a fiction writing, it's a little harder than nonfiction. Like I can crank out 2,000 nonfiction words on a topic I know like really fast. But
yeah,
fiction, it still takes for 2,000 words. That probably takes me 2 hours of like really focused time.
yeah, yeah. And I would do it in the evening after work. So I would just take a couple hours and get my words in every day. Um, and yeah,
This-
I'm definitely trying to spread that out again next time. My wife didn't appreciate that much. So
Well, that's cool
family.
that she's. That was going to be a follow up question. The time commitment of several hours in the evening for a whole month straight, that adds up really quickly. So it sounds like your family was super supportive of this once you started getting momentum.
I mean, they definitely helped by putting up with it. But it wasn't easy on them, and so I would like to do better about that next time. You know, so ideally, I will be sprinkling it out more and making it less demanding. So again,
Cool.
with the holidays, it doesn't make any of that easy. So I don't think I'm gonna just do. I probably won't do
No,
NaNoWriMo in November. It's not a really great month for it.
no, isn't there another month that they like
There's
to
like
do
an
it?
April one. There's like the spring one. I can't remember, Camp NaNoWriMo or something. There's another one, but I'll
Okay.
probably just sync up with my Nano buddy, and we'll just pick another time to do it. And maybe we'll choose 2 months, or maybe we'll use whatever, and still have a regular schedule because I think that was important, but make it less onerous.
I think for Brandon Sanderson, NaNoWriMo's every week. So
Pretty much, he probably wrote another novel while his Kickstarter was running. So
yeah, that does take us to another thing though. I saw on your YouTube channel you've put up 2 videos so far of reading his secret, a couple of chapters
yeah,
from 2 of his secret books.
yeah.
What made you decide to do that? Did you just want to give him a demo, or did you
I
just
got
want
a
to
lot of
explore it yourself?
nominations they had a Reddit thread. I got a lot of nominations in there from people, which was really nice. And so I thought, well, let's try it on, see what it is, see how it feels. I always thought it would be really cool to do a Brandon Sanderson book. I didn't really figure there was much chance that would happen, but since these are kind of shorties and they're actually asking, it's an easy way to kind of like pre-audition with anybody who would care to listen to it, and if they look at it, cool. If not, it was still really cool to have that many people like bump me up in the Reddit thread. So,
I gotta say,
you're like, go ahead, Remix.
I was gonna say I'll be pretty upset if you don't end up narrating them now, because I listened to the first 2 chapters and I'm waiting for the next ones now.
It would be fun to do. It would be fun to do. I hope I get to do it. But if I don't, I'm sure it'll be somebody else who's really good, and it'll be really cool. So,
But to say,
such a crazy project.
I don't think you're hurting for books to read at this point.
No,
right?
no, I don't need to. I don't need to add things to the schedule, so it helps that they're short. But my schedule is constantly changing because my schedule is different, I think, than somebody who does a lot of big publisher books. Since mine are mostly indie pub, their schedules are much, much tighter. And so if there's a miss on the schedule, it requires an actual reschedule, as opposed to we've been planning this for a year and the script's been done for a year. It's very like, oh, we finished and we publish within a week kind of thing. So if anything slips, stuff slips. So it's a little more complicated. My schedule's funky.
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, so I have so many questions about that, but I think that might go out beyond the scope of this call. Just, I don't know, just scheduling in general, like your calendar.
It looks like somebody took melted Skittles and just smeared them all over the Google Calendar. It's just a mess.
Oh man.
It's like air traffic control. Things are constantly moving. This book needs to move out 2 months. This book is ready now. And there's always new books coming in, and usually it's like, okay, you don't really want to hear when this is going to go on the schedule, but there's a likelihood that it might get pulled earlier when somebody inevitably moves a book. But that's a really hard thing to articulate, and it's hard to commit to. It's hard to say, well, yeah, it's going to be years until I can put this on the schedule, but maybe sooner. And I'm really bad at saying no. Like I said, I have a problem with overcommitting. So I always try and make things work. So
I was gonna ask
if somebody misses a book, it's like not cool to say, oh, okay, well now it's going to be 3 years until you can get it recorded because you didn't make your date. That's not nice. So it's this really weird juggling act. It's very, I didn't anticipate it would go like this.
I was gonna say, how choosy are you, or can you be? I guess is
I mean, I can be as choosy I want to be, but the problem is that most of the books that are on my calendar haven't even been written. So it's not like I can say, hey, can I read a chapter? It doesn't exist. So
right.
You've got a lot of series going, and like
there's
the
a
more
lot of
series you pick up, the more you're obligated. Yeah.
And in progression fantasy and gamelit, it's like, oh, let's release 12 volumes and we'll do 3 a year. So that pretty rapidly packs up the schedule with stuff.
Right.
So it's really different. It's really different. I'm not complaining because it's a good problem to have. Having work to do, I don't want to seem ungrateful in any way, and I am absolutely not. I'm extremely grateful for the work I have, but it's like it's a weird 4D chess that I didn't anticipate that it would be.
Right. Have you reached full saturation to the point where you have to start like referring other audio narrators?
Usually I don't know if I refer. There's been a few times where I've referred somebody. But usually somebody's just asking me, can you do this? And I'm like, well, here's when I could do it, and here's what it will be. Let me know if that works. And that's kind of the extent of the conversation. And sometimes people are coming with books, and it's like, I know they're not going to recoup their money. So I'm like, hey, have you done the cocktail napkin math on this to make sure that you really want to do this? If your ebook is not moving sufficient numbers, you're not going to probably cover it because the audio is really driven by the book. The audiobook is not going to suddenly make the book sell more, and it's not going to sell more independent of the book. So if the book is not already covering your cost for this, and you don't, then you want to think really hard about this, because I don't want somebody to record a book that they regret recording and they're just out the money either, because they're not cheap. They're more expensive than a book to produce.
Right.
So.
And you know that for sure now. You've been through the whole process.
Yeah. When you can make a book as expensive as you want, but most authors, especially first-time authors, aren't. They're they're pinching their pennies on their covers. They're doing a lot of stuff themselves. They're keeping the costs pretty low.
Right. Which So like I read your article, and the part that there's a lot of parts that were interesting. One I want to ask about now though is the categories that you sign up for versus the categories you end up getting put in.
Yeah.
Right now you're number 1 in gas lamp fantasy. Do you
Yeah.
know what gas lamp fantasy is?
I think it's basically kind of like Victorian fantasy almost.
Okay.
But I think it probably also borders over into
Ah,
steampunk a little bit. There's
Right.
probably this kind
yeah.
of like it's gaslight. It's kind of like that's probably the best way that I can describe it.
Gotcha. Did you choose that
Pre-electricity.
category?
I did, yeah,
Nice.
because I looked at other books, genre books that were similar to it, and you just look at what categories they're in, and you're like, okay, I can probably place in this category. As long as
Okay.
it's not super. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in like teen sports. That wouldn't make any sense. But
Right.
you're looking for categories that have overlap and that are reasonably similar. I mean, humorous fantasy, and it's not like it's a chuckle haha book, but it does have some funny bits. So it's like there's a certain amount of lightness of tone. Is it a humorous fantasy book? I mean, kind of, yeah. But also, if you look at all the books in there, they're also kind of, yeah.
Right.
There's um, Audible really only lets you pick 2 categories, though. And those categories are not the same as what's reflected when they actually show up. And then they start doing this percolation where it starts to categorize you based on what things you're proximate to, I think, and what people buy in conjunction with it and stuff. And so what you do is you just try and say, okay, if I can place in something where there are similar books, where people are looking at this book, and there's another book that is similar, kind of like either in tone or content that they might be interested in my book. And then you try and kind of fold yourself into those categories.
Right.
And you can also choose to remove yourself from categories, but you only start with 2, which isn't very many. So you're like fantasy, and that's it.
Yeah.
Do you have to pick high level categories like that, or can you
You can
go
only
in?
pick high level. You don't get to actually go down into any of those subcategories. So everything is in those subcategories, but that's where you got filtered. So you can kind of like filter yourself down into those subcategories to try and at least be in a chart that someone would see on with books that are somewhat similar to the book that you are making.
I was going to say Audible's really flawed in that part of the reason why I ended up finding or reading every single thing that Travis narrates is it's really hard to find a book in the lit RPG or progression fantasy genre by searching
Yeah,
for that category. You have to search,
because it doesn't exist. There's
yeah,
like
search by
fantasy
author or
gaming or something, it's
yeah. So now I know Travis reads mostly lit RPG, progression fantasy kind of things. So it's like, okay, this is probably what I'm looking for. I'll just take this next thing. But yeah, Audible is super flawed when it comes to
Oh,
that kind of
that's
stuff.
so funny. Look, it has you listed as a romance author primarily.
Yeah, I noticed that.
See, and I didn't pick that.
Right.
Stuff just happens.
Just a dollop of romance. Audible, come on.
It's
So
just the way the
strange.
categories work that it probably gets down to what categories do people most buy it in, because it's in like fantasy
Mm,
romance, which is legitimate,
it's true, yeah.
but
Right.
I'll tell you,
you're at
I
the
did
mercy
not
of the
see
algorithms.
yeah, I did not see that coming. And then when it came, I was like, that's organic. That's awesome.
Well, it wasn't intended. I was going to have them be really good friends, but that's just the way it went. So,
Yeah.
and and there wasn't a big course correction, but it was just like that seems to be what's happening. So,
No, I
That's
thought that was
cool.
a
Like if
perfect ending to go on. It felt so real, felt very organic is the best word, I guess. Bamf used it already, but
I needed a sweet
yeah.
happy ending.
I
oh man,
liked
the
the
ending was so
epilogue.
good.
The
Yeah, the
epilogue was
epilogue was
great.
good.
I forgot about the cat too. It's
You
like,
can't forget about Amity.
yeah.
Weren't you the
The
one that told me about the classic goddamn cat?
no. But I did. I told you about that in the other book. I didn't mention it when I was talking about Travis's book, though.
I
But
know.
yeah,
Yeah, the goddamn cat
I do like the goddamn cat.
trope.
For those of you that don't remember, Art of the Adept has a cat that is like a god or something like that, and
But you don't
that
know that. It's just the
right,
goddamn cat for a while. Do
yeah,
not
just
piss off the goddamn cat.
yeah, so good. So about characters, how much? First, I have so many questions. I keep getting analysis paralysis, thinking which one I want to ask you. How many characters did you write that didn't make it into the book, if any? And like, did you flesh out more characters?
None that didn't make it into the
Really?
book.
Okay.
No.
It was just additional conversation that hadn't happened that you wrote to keep them consistent.
Yeah, so Cal kind of didn't present himself enough in the middle of the book. After they built it, he dropped in a couple times, but he needed to show up a little bit more to be more constant. So there's just a few little bits that got added in. There was a few conversations between Tandri and Viv that were just kind of like silent moments that then got a little more conversation to them and became a little more active. Just a few little things. The book is remarkably close to the first draft structurally. I mean, there was tons of edits. Mostly it was taking stuff that was like pruning out redundancies, streamlining things a way that could be streamlined, finding things that could use a little bit more, and just like little continuity fixes, that kind of stuff. And then just basic, like, we're going to move this comma over here. Because I punctuate based on the way I narrate, which is not the same as punctuation rules.
Right. Yeah.
I put the pause where I hear it, which is not exactly the same as the way punctuation rules work. So there was always like this little tug of war between, I need to pause here, but that's not where the comma normally goes.
Yeah.
When you were editing yourself, I think after you went through the process a bit, you started editing more yourself just to get ahead of some of the stuff. Did you
Yeah.
did you catch yourself editing based off of how you would read it out loud for a while until you realized what
I
you were
mean,
doing?
it was structurally pretty close to the way I would read it out loud already, because when I was writing it, I was hearing it in my head. So most of the edits were like for the kinds of things that my editor was picking out. Um, which I'm struggling to come up with examples now. They would be really apparent to me if I went back and looked at the track changes. But yeah, I'm trying to come up with an example and I can't.
Yeah, I just remember because I like to listen and read at the same time
Yeah.
to like consistently pace my way through the whole book. And
I
I
think
there were a couple times where the way that, especially in conversations, like with emphasizing certain words, that doesn't always come through in the reading, but you're able to emphasize it with speaking. And I remember thinking to myself, that's interesting. And I wonder if when he was writing this, the conversation in his head changed the way that he wrote it and edited it, and if that ended up having to get changed later
the
to like be
dialogue is
more.
really close to what I originally wrote. I'm really specific about dialogue, but also people hate italics everywhere. So there's a lot of places where you imply stress, but you don't make it explicit, because otherwise it makes you sound insane because everything is italicized. So, but I knew how the characters sounded and what their dialogue sounded like in my head when I wrote it, because I was basically hearing it. I get to kind of shortcut a lot of this because I
Mhm.
read and am internalizing this stuff. This is like my job. So it was really helpful. I also have kind of the filter of reading a bunch of stuff out loud and being really clear about what I like and what I don't like as a result, because I don't get to skim when I read. So the book's really lean, but that's largely because I get really impatient with superfluous stuff. So I had a lot of pre-editing that happened in my brain. So the book was about 61, 62K when I finished writing it. And I think we pruned out, 1 to 2K of like redundancies, like, oh, this has been said 2 ways. It doesn't need to be. Um, uh, just leaning out where it needed to be leaned out, and then probably put about that much back. And as far as expanded scenes, or a couple little additional bits.
Interesting.
So that's cool. So you ended up pruning out, adding more, and it ended up being around the same.
It was basically near this exact same size, yeah.
I feel like that's got to be rare.
Well, yeah, because we always hear. I mean, Remix and I clearly a lot of learning about writing has come from Will and
Yeah.
how he is very open with sharing that kind of information, and how he tends to write. Depending on which book, he writes a bunch and then cuts out all the extra, or he'll just cut out all the extra in his head and just only do the spots that he
Only do the
think
good
matter.
bits. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I learned a lot by reading Will's stuff, because I really admire the way that he has such nice, lean writing that evokes a lot with relatively little. So I try to do a lot of that because I really appreciate that. I don't do it the same way as Will, and I'm not as good at it as Will, but the same idea. I like that idea. So I definitely tried to do that to an extent.
I did notice that you didn't go overboard with the flowery language, which is something you don't like to do, but the more image, like you had imagery in certain parts that was like really vivid, but it was like concise, and it was awesome. And it made me think like, did that happen only in editing? Or were
No,
you
I
able
did that. Did that deliberately. So I like little bits of evocative stuff, but as soon as it starts to pile on, and that's all there is, I get really exhausted of it because I can't hold that much in my brain. I just
Right.
start to glaze. So if I can just get like, I just want that one like little postcard shot that sets it, and then let me get on with it and let things fill in. I really don't like over descriptions of characters. Just important stuff. I
I
don't
really
want to
appreciated
know.
that.
I I really get impatient with that. I don't care about the lacing on your tunic or like the stitching or what kind of shoes you're wearing. Like, you're wearing shoes, it's probably looks great. I don't need that for my brain. I think
Yeah.
some people really do. Some people really like that sort of density of world building and like setting the scene, but it makes me impatient.
Well, it's like training wheels for your imagination.
Um,
You can fill all that in your head, as long as you know the characters and like where the plot's going and stuff.
I think it's valid for people to want that. I think some people want a world that is just perfectly detailed. They want like, tell me everything about everything. I want to, because it makes it feel real to them in a way that otherwise it does not. Like, and I think you see that a lot with first time authors too. They also try and do that. They want it all to feel so real to you that they
Mhm.
want to detail all of the mundanity of it so that you really get this picture. Absolutely. The problem I have with that is a lot of times it's really easy to start exposing flaws in your world building when you do that, because the details that you add maybe don't make sense or don't connect or don't jive. And so instead of letting the reader just fill that in for you, you're giving them opportunities to trip. Like, you start thinking, wait, how do they do that? How do they get up there? How would they even get that thread? Where who does this stitching? You live in a town of like 8 people. You start the more you start adding these little bitty, very specific details, the more you want more and more to have it explained why they could even happen. And
Yeah.
once that starts, that avalanche, it's almost impossible to stop. And then all of a sudden, all the world building breaks. It's like you pop the soap
Yeah,
bubble. And so that happens to me a lot.
Yeah, you can get
yeah.
pulled out of your fantasy quite easily when you overdo it like that and don't do
Which is
enough
weird.
homework.
It feels like every detail should cement it, but they break it
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you didn't go into the supply chain of how how she kept getting all of this like coffee supplies from these faraway places. I just
And
loved
I
how
like
it would.
it. I like continuity. I mean, they delivered it there. They have a post.
Yes.
They figured that out. I don't need to tell you how the post works. They figured it out. Somebody there is smart enough to know how mail works.
Right.
Yeah, and the transportation of like large, delicate machinery safely. That was cool. Like, because you didn't have to worry about it.
Yep. It's in a crate. It's packed in straw. It's packed in or wood shavings or something.
and those
There's
gnome
a lot of
engineers.
implied there's magic implied in
It
this
helps
universe.
to have a little magic implied because you can hand wave a lot of how do they get ice? Well, there's just a big gnomish place where they make ice. I'm not
Yeah.
going to tell you how it works. I don't care.
It
Did
was
you have
amazing.
did you have fun renaming things that exist in modernity that wouldn't have existed in most fantasy situations, like the arcane amplifier for the
Yeah.
bard?
I did
Basically,
have
it's
a
his
little fun with
amp for
that.
his guitar.
His amp versus his magic lute.
Oh yeah. No, I love that. There was another one. It was very early on. I can't remember anymore, but it was Viv explaining lattes
To Cal, we're talking about like the
yeah.
barista.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
What's a barista? I don't know. I
Yeah.
didn't make up the word.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
I was trying not to do too much of that because I had when you got into things like croissants and biscotti, I was like, well, I could use the word or I could come up with some twee way to come with it, but I was like, you know what? It's too much.
Thimblets.
It's
Oh
too
yeah, and
much.
then the cinnamon rolls, and I thought that
Yeah.
was I think that's where a lot of your humor came from, was
Giant rolls of cinnamon.
were those things. Yeah. So good.
That was so good. Cool. So here's a question. You found success writing what you know. You like the idea of like a relaxing palate cleansing type book in between, darker books. Do you think this like wholesome type narrative is untapped? Because we've seen a lot of success with things like this, like with Ted Lasso as like a television show, now with your
I
book.
think there's more of it coming out. I mean, you got like the House on the Cerulean Sea. I think there's definitely a want for it, and I think there's definitely books that are doing that. If you look at Becky Chambers, a long way to a small angry planet, that stuff, the Psalm for the Wild Built. There's kind of a certain amount of like gentle. I don't want to say cozy fiction because it's not all cozy, but it's like this gentler kind of slice of life stuff. I'd almost say that Murderbot falls into that because a lot of it's introspective. There are some action scenes in Murderbot, but a lot of it is Murderbot thinking about being Murderbot.
I
So
haven't read Murderbot. I'm
You
gonna
haven't
put
read
that on
all-
the
Yeah.
list.
Yeah, you should read Murderbot. They're really brief. They're really short. They're novella length.
so now that you've made a successful novel, you mentioned at the beginning you wanted to make World of Warcraft, or something big, like that's what you tried to
Yeah,
do in your previous
yeah.
NaNoWriMos. Do you want to still try to tackle something like that, or have you found the satisfaction that you were looking for?
I don't know if I need to do anything I want to do something a little bigger than this, but still, I mean, the next one I want to do is more of like it's a cozy fantasy mystery, which is I have some characters that I really like, and it'll have a little more conflict than this one, but it also has something specific stuff that it wants to talk about. So I don't want to write the same kind of stories, but I don't know if I need to write, the Wheel of Time, or I don't need to make. I feel like people are doing that really well, and I don't need to do it. And
Okay.
I can do something simpler.
Right. I was just curious, is that if you got the satisfaction that you felt like you were looking for prior to this success, I guess. So,
I mean,
um,
this in the end has been really, really satisfying. It's been really satisfying to have it connect with people, and I didn't expect it to, not in the way that it has. So I've gotten really nice feedback from people where it was like, this is something they needed right now. And I was something that I needed, after 2 years of COVID. It was the kind of thing that I wanted. It's like one time I went to Italy with my wife for like 2 weeks, and we didn't have like any vegetables the entire time. It was all just pasta and pizza. And I remember getting back to the airport in Heathrow, and there was like broccoli, and I was like, oh my God, I have got to have some broccoli right now. My body is telling me in every way that I need this. And so I don't know, I felt kind of like that.
okay.
I needed something, and I wasn't reading it normally. So
Yeah, I was reading Mother of Learning, or I was listening to Mother of Learning, and I didn't realize that like the idea of being caught in a time loop would like sort of stress me out, like hearing it. And then
Groundhog Day.
and then I switched over to this book, and yeah, like a couple chapters in, I'm just like relaxed. I'm able to go do some chores around the house pretty easily, listening to you read your own book. It was great. So yeah, it was something I had never thought about before. How like that being a thing.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a thing. So I'm glad we have this recorded so I can add some of those other slice of life palate cleansers, which is what like that's how I'm going to refer to them. These like palate cleansing books that like take you back to baseline. So thank
You
you for
know,
those.
I find an odd parallel between this slice of life kind of genre and then the overpowered main character kind of genre, where the main character gets everything they want. So that's maybe it's because there's this lack of stress or tensity in the main character. You're not worried about how they're going to accomplish this thing. You're just curious about how they're going to do it instead.
Yeah.
Um,
And this is
uh,
another book where basically the main character is getting all what they want. It's just it doesn't happen to be world-shaking power.
right. Yeah. Um, yeah, that's interesting. And yeah,
It's kind of an interesting thing to write, when you're trying to write this stuff. So this is slice of life, but I also I don't really I like having things happen. I like for there still to be some sort of structure to it. So it was kind of interesting to write slice of life with structure, which is what progression fantasy has. It's like this leveling up and with structure. So there's like some sort of story structure underpinning all of this, but also there's this parallel like getting better thing. They're both happening simultaneously.
Yeah, you
And
have
sometimes,
milestones along the way to your overarching goal,
yeah.
which is nice. I really like the organized crime concept that you had in your book.
See, to me, what that is it's homeowners insurance. The madrigal is basically the medieval equivalent of homeowners insurance.
I was thinking an
You gotta have it.
HOA.
You gotta have it. It's really not optional.
Yeah.
And except theirs is actually much more effective.
Right. 'Cause you get your place burned down if you don't take it.
Theirs is actually effective. So
Yeah,
I just thought it was funny. Yeah, that it's basically just homeowners insurance.
Yeah. I've actually used homeowners insurance quite a bit. It's sucks that you have to pay for it, but when you need it, it's nice.
Yeah, if only you could only pay for it in cinnamon rolls, it would be perfect.
True.
that would be perfect.
Very.
More wish fulfillment in my wish fulfillment book.
I'm sure in some HOAs, in some small towns somewhere, you can pay your dues in like really like if you own a store. I'm sure that exists. I'm gonna. It's wishful thinking.
The barter system. The barter system.
Back to basics. All right, Travis. I think we're starting to tap out here, but again, we love that you're like a friend of the show. We love hearing your voice, and I loved your book. And I'm gonna ping you about writing, about working out. Actually, I meant to mention this earlier. I've enjoyed working out since we talked. I'm investing heavily into building a full gym in my garage.
Right on.
Wow.
Like a rack,
Congrats.
a barbell, bumper plates,
Congrats.
the whole
I
9
bought a
yards.
rowing
Yeah.
machine, so.
Congrats. I hope it works out well for you and you feel better.
Oh, I already do. Yeah, those
Rad.
aches and pains starting to go away, and I'm 31, about to be 32, so I feel like I shouldn't
sucks to
have them
hurt
yet.
at 30. Yeah, it sucks to hurt in your early 30s.
Yeah, so getting anyway, I appreciate what you've done for the community. I hope that the over like the yes man stuff doesn't take too much of a toll on you, but we really appreciate your time.
I really appreciate you guys having me on, and it's been really fun to chat and everything that you guys do for everybody in the Cradle community. So
Thanks, man.
Aw.
Well, if you're watching this and you somehow haven't picked up Legends and Lattes, please do. It's worth your time. It's a short listen, it's a short read. And as I said 5 or 6 times, it's a palate cleanser. You'll feel better after reading it. I know I certainly did. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll catch you next time.
thanks, y'all.
See ya.